Yeah, so last week we were able to bring you guys an interview with Andrew Grant Houston, and this week we are bringing you Seattle mayoral candidate Colleen Echohawk. I was particularly excited about this interview because I am a historian, and my primary area of focus is American Indian and Indigenous history in the Pacific Northwest. And she would actually be, if elected, the first Indigenous mayor of Seattle since the office's inception in the latter part of the 19th century. So I hope you guys enjoy the first half of this interview.
Yeah, and we're going to leave the commenting section on so you can share your thoughts and discuss while we're rolling this interview. And with that, we're going to go ahead and roll part one.
Hello, malcontents. This is Jennifer, and I'm here today with Seattle mayoral candidates, Colleen Echohawk. How are you doing today, Colleen?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be with you.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you here. So just to kind of start off, what inspired you to run for mayor of Seattle?
Well, thank you so much for asking. You know, this is a beautiful, wonderful city. I have lived here now for over 20 years, and I care deeply about our community. And I have seen, along with all of us who live here, the tremendous frustration around some policies that are just not working for our city, specifically homelessness. I have been working in homelessness now for over 7 years. I believe deeply in our homeless community. I believe that they can get to wellness and stability and housing, but we have not set up the structures that will help them get to that place of wellness. And so as the pandemic came, crashing down on us, I saw our homeless community really suffering. And then I also saw that our city was not responding in a way that, serve them well and serve the rest of our community. I think, those of us who live in the city, it's so frustrating for us because we care deeply about our community, including our homeless community. But when we see that we're not getting anywhere, it is incredibly frustrating. So that was one of the big reasons. The other thing is COVID-19. I have been serving our homeless community and our Native community for a very long time now. I know very, very well that we have some incredible disparity, some health outcomes around COVID-19 that were really hard to hear and see. In the Native community, we were 1.8 times more likely to die of COVID, more likely to be hospitalized because of COVID. And those kind of numbers were already there before the pandemic. And then as I thought about what would happen after, I realized we need leadership that understands equity, that understands racial justice, so that we can come out of this pandemic stronger, that we can address these inequities and be the kind of city that we say we are. We are a progressive, compassionate, generous city. And I look forward to the opportunity to lead with a lens of equity and justice.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I think this is an excellent segue into our first question.
Great.
So Seattle is facing an ongoing crisis related to unhomed peoples. Washington State experienced a 6.2% increase in homelessness during 2019-2020, and King County spends over $1 billion per year in public and private investment in support of approximately 12,500 houseless people, with disappointing results. If you were elected mayor of Seattle, how would you address this crisis? And also, as co-founder of the Coalition to End Urban Indigenous Homelessness, which aids unhomed urban Indigenous people in making positive changes that facilitate healing and wellness, can you speak to the unique challenges Indigenous people living in urban spaces like Seattle face?
Well, thank you so much for the question. And one thing we know about our homeless community here in Seattle and around the country actually is that people of color are way overrepresented in the community and the homeless community. So for instance, here in Seattle, Native people make up less than 1% of the population, but in our homeless population, we make up 15%. So an incredible disparity. That's about 1,000 to 1,100 people who are of Native people who are experiencing homelessness on the streets of Seattle. And then you think about, this city. We are named after a chief. We are a Coast Salish city at the heart of who we are as a community. And so it truly is unbelievable that we have such high rates of Native people experiencing homelessness. And even more unbelievable than that, in a city like Seattle that's very prosperous, and innovative and entrepreneurial, we have so many of our community experiencing homelessness, around 12,000 folks are experiencing homelessness, and about 3,000 to 4,000 of those are people who are going to sleep outside at night, every single night. It's truly horrific, in my opinion. It is a humanitarian crisis, and we have to do more. And as mayor of the city, I have the unique lens of actually being a homelessness provider and also a builder of affordable housing. So I know that we are going to have to take many approaches. There's not one solution to solving homelessness in our city. It'll take many approaches. Excuse me, the moment I'm elected, I will be jumping into finding solutions that are going to be kind of the all of the above approach. We need more tiny houses. We're going to need more hoteling. We're going to need safe lots for RVs and other vehicles. There will be a variety of different things for people to choose. We also need culturally appropriate case management and services. When we think about the Native community, many of our Native folks, because of the fear of government institutions, which we come to, legally, we have not found many solutions in the mainstream organizations. So I would be thinking about and supporting and innovating around Black-led services and Native-led services, so that we find cultural approaches that would serve our homeless community. And I believe that's one of the reasons we have such high rates of Native homelessness, is that we haven't had those culturally specific programs. The same for the Black community and our refugee community who are experiencing homelessness. I think that this is an exciting opportunity for our city. We have the American Relief Program coming in. We have FEMA dollars that we can use. We have we have a friend in the White House who believes so much in taking care of this issue that's not just here in Seattle, but around the country. I have worked on the national level. I founded the National Coalition in Urban Indigenous Homelessness. I'm a new board member at the National Low Income Housing Coalition. So I understand what it will take, because that's the final part, is we have to build enough. I would say to anyone who lives in Seattle, let's put our frustrations behind us and let's join a campaign together to serve our homeless community, get them out of our parks and out of our right-of-ways. Our homeless community is not a place that they can thrive there. They need to thrive in housing, and then we all can be, use our parks and use our greenways. And it's just gotten really out of control, and we have to have leadership that will that understands the issue and knows how to solve it. And I'm that leader.
As a result of the ongoing COVID pandemic, economic recovery and development, as well as addressing Seattle's crumbling transit infrastructure, such as the West Seattle Bridge, is of great importance to many.
Yeah.
Moreover, some are expressing concern about large corporations and many in the workforce leaving Seattle. The question then is threefold. How do you plan on tackling the infrastructure issue, aiding in economic recovery and development as we move beyond COVID? And what concerns do you have about the loss of corporations and workers?
We know that in our city, we have some pretty severe issues around infrastructure. We have the West Seattle Bridge, the Magnolia Bridge that needs replaced. We have, streets that need to be supported. We have garbage on our streets that, I think is unacceptable. I think we should not have that in our city. And as an executive director of a pretty large nonprofit, I understand the role of the mayor as being the executive to care for our city, to care for our whole city. I have a lot of experience in homelessness, but I also have experience in management and taking care of our community. And I look forward to putting those skills into place, because we need to have shovel-ready projects. Like I mentioned earlier, we now have a friend in the White House. We have President Biden, and when he comes out with infrastructure packages, which is happening right now, we need to be ready. We need to go. I would work really closely with Patty Murray. She's the number 2 Democrat on the Senate's Appropriation Committee. I would work very closely with her and let her know what our needs are in Seattle. Also, Senator Cantwell, she chairs the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. We are so lucky to have their leadership, and I would just be excited to talk with them and share with them about what the opportunities are here in Seattle and what we absolutely need. I have a lot of experience in going after the dollars that we need to be able to take care of our community. We also know that Governor Inslee has an infrastructure plan, and I would be active in reaching out to him and ensuring that we get our needs met here
The second part of the question deals with aiding in economic recovery and development as we move beyond COVID.
We have a real reality ahead of us that it's going to take some time to recover from COVID. And we know that our economy needs to recover and our community needs to recover. In many ways, we need an opportunity to heal. And we also need people who are going to jump in and get to work immediately. About 9 months ago, I started to really understand that we can't just be focused on an economic recovery. We have to be thinking about an equitable recovery, because when our economy is equitable, then we are truly going to be able to support the whole community. So I co-founded the Equitable Recovery and Reconciliation Alliance. The idea behind our we call it ERA, the idea behind ERA is that the BIPOC community, the Black, Indigenous, and people of color community, we have a policy-driven solutions that need to be implemented, but we often don't have the voice that we need to have. And then my co-founder, his name is Ben Franz Knight, and he is the previous executive director at Pike Place Market. His role is to help our community who is really working to understand what it means to be equitable in our recovery. His role is to help them come together. So we're looking and working with things like the Downtown Seattle Association, Greater Seattle Business Partners, the Chamber of Commerce, to think about what it means to support BIPOC-led solutions. And so this is, again, an opportunity. This is a once in a generation chance to do the right thing. So I look forward to doing this in partnership with community. And I do also hope that our corporations come back into downtown Seattle and see this place as an opportunity to continue our legacy of innovation, to continue our legacy of entrepreneurship in this region. And I would be there to support them and to ensure that why we see corporations and businesses coming back into our city, that we see it with a lens of equity and racial justice. It's really an excellent and exciting opportunity.
Moving on to the topic of equity and racial justice, due to protests related to the murder of George Floyd, police violence, and ongoing racial inequality, Seattle has earned a national reputation as crime-ridden, dirty, and unsafe. At one point, the city was labeled by the previous presidential administration as an jurisdiction. Are you concerned about this narrow view of Seattle? If so, what will you do to shift this perception? And how will you address the ongoing racial inequality that exists in Seattle?
I don't know about you, but I had people calling me from around the country, friends and relatives, saying, what's going on in Seattle? It's just like an anarchist takeover. It's happening, and everything is burning. And as you know, that is not true. And I think that we really do need to be thinking about changing the narrative around Seattle. If I was elected mayor, I would see myself as an ambassador to the rest of the state and the country and the world to say, this is what Seattle is about. This is a community of amazing, progressive, generous, compassionate, entrepreneurial community, and we warmly welcome you to our city. I think that there is amazing opportunity around tourism. I hope that our Black and Indigenous and people of color-led organizations see this opportunity to think about ways that we can support the tourism industry and incubate business that maybe hasn't happened before. I think that we absolutely want to change this weird narrative that's happened around Seattle and show who we really are. I've also talked to people, in the suburbs of Seattle, and they say things like, "Oh, Seattle, traffic's too bad," just kind of complaining about Seattle. I want to change that narrative too. I want people to remember that we have the Kraken, and we have the Mariners and the Seahawks, and we have a thriving nightlife and restaurants that people want to come to. And let's make this a great place for people to celebrate big celebrations and to come to sporting events and to be, coming to our wonderful arenas. I just think it's a really cool opportunity that I look forward to jumping into. No one loves the city more than I do. My sister, when I was thinking about running for mayor, and I also had an opportunity out in Washington, D.C., she's like, Colleen, you love Seattle. Like, why would you go to Washington, D.C.? I'm like, you're totally right. I love this place. And I just am going to do the best I can to lift it up and tell and celebrate the city and let the world know what a great community we truly are.
Yeah, so she definitely has a lot of passion and enthusiasm for Seattle, and I think that's very evident in the first part of her interview. In the second half of the interview, we get into a little bit deeper conversation as we did with the first candidate, and I have a couple of questions that are, I think, a little bit more specific to her because she is would be the first Indigenous mayor were she elected.
Yeah, what we'll do a little pause for the cause. We'll call out the potato scones, and then we're going to go ahead. We'll come back to you, Jennifer, and we'll do part 2.
Okay.
Black coffee is a hub for communities and a hub for meeting people, making friends, and understanding.
What Black coffee is to me is a place to actually call home, a place where Black youth will feel welcomed, where Black families will come and feel like they're at home.
What we're trying to build is more than just coffee. Community is something that we do naturally. We know who's in the community, we know what the deficits are, and we're trying to fix that. We want to bring people together.
My hope is that the phrase grounded in excellence shows up everywhere and that it becomes a movement.
I'm looking forward to hanging out at Black Coffee with my friends and feeling safe.
Black coffee to me means opportunity for people like me and my other friends and family to come here and do homework safely and hang out and stuff like that.
That is happening. It is happening.
Black Coffee Northwest is located in Shoreline, Washington. They have amazing coffee. They have an amazing merch, and they have potato scones. It is like the fluffiest, most amazing scone you've ever had in your life. Had a baby with a baked potato that has cheese and onion in it. You need to get the potato scones. Check their hours online because they wiggle a little bit from time to time. Jennifer, go ahead and introduce up the second part of the interview.
So yeah, just like the last mayoral candidate, Andrew Houston, we have a similar set of questions related to police reform and taxes. But I also have a very direct question for her about what it would mean for her to be the first Indigenous mayor of Seattle. We also had a conversation that we had to edit for time that I'm hoping we get to air eventually about this really interesting great program she has for Native women leaders. It's a town hall program. So we did talk about that, but unfortunately in the interest of time had to cut it. But yeah, it was a really great conversation. If you're interested in Native women leaders and the town hall she holds, I would totally check out her Facebook page because that's where she posts the information.
In addressing like the racial inequality piece, how would you work to kind of move beyond that and think more critically about solutions for the ongoing racial inequality that exists within Seattle?
We have some significant issues in our city around this. We are a progressive city, but we don't always live out our progressive values. And I hope to really inspire, encourage, and envision with everyone about what that could really look like. I'll give you an example. We struggle right now with with housing for our Black community. Our Black community has been pushed out of the Central District. And we also know that essential workers can't afford to live here. And a lot of them are people of color. We have to be, if we believe that Black Lives Matter, if we believe in our progressive values, that means we believe in housing for them. That means we believe in the incubation of small businesses that are owned by Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. And so I hope to truly help our communities, our neighbors understand that value and understand that when we do practice equity and racial justice, that it's good for our whole community. It's not just good for the Black and Indigenous and people of color communities, it's good for everyone. And that's going to be super exciting for us as a community.
And so when compared to the West Coast cities of Portland, San Francisco, San Jose, Sacramento, Oakland, San Diego, Seattle has the second highest cost per police officer, tied with Oakland, and the second highest officer per capita behind San Francisco. Additionally, the average officer makes $153,000 a year before benefits, according to the Seattle Times. Despite this large force and supporting budget, Seattle Police report slow response times and claim the issue is a lack of staffing. The budget was cut approximately 18% and staffing levels were adjusted to support roughly 1,325 officers. How would you define defund the police? What is your position? And how would you go about restoring community, particularly BIPOC community trust in the Seattle Police Department?
Yeah, this is something that is of grave concern for me. You know, I got my start in working in the police reform arena after the murder of John T. Williams. It's still jarring. It's still kind of just unbelievable. Native people have the highest rates of being shot by police around the country. And we're a very small part of the population. We have to do better. And, you know, as I look at our whole city, we need to make sure that our police department is accountable and transparent. We need a reset of the police department from top to bottom. And I'm always open to looking at our pay structure for absolutely. I also believe that part of the mayor's job is to find an excellent chief of police and hold that chief of police accountable for our police officers that are out there. I've also been on the Community Police Commission, and I know the issues really well. I mean, our reform since, again, the murder of John T. Williams and the consent decree, it's been a decent start, but it's also failed us, as we saw over the summer. We have a real problem when we see officers hiding their badges during protests. We still see incredible racial disparity in arrests, and this is one of my top priorities if I'm elected. We will find a chief of police to will hold our Seattle Police Department accountable. The issues of race disparity in our police department, we do absolutely have to think of a cultural shift in that department. And that starts straight from the chief all the way down to every single police officer, to someone out there on the beat. There is an accountability that absolutely has to happen from the community. And I look forward to continuing to evaluate our reform system as is. I think that there is a lot of room for us to strengthen it. And I would look forward to hearing from community about community-led solutions that will ensure that we have a police department that is not just, they're not warriors, but they are guardians, that they are there to support the community in times of incredible, significant need. And until we get there, we have to have a mayor that will hold them accountable. And I can tell you that that is a passion of mine, something I look forward to doing. And if elected, that would be one of my top priorities.
On the topic of police accountability and reform, one of the many things COVID has shed light on is the ongoing mental health crisis in the country. Seattle is not exempt from this. Recently, a man in the throes of a mental health crisis was fatally wounded by SVE near the Seattle waterfront. Would you consider implementing something similar to the STAR program in Colorado, which replaces traditional law enforcement responders with a medic and mental health professional for some emergency calls as a way to de-escalate situations where there's a clear mental health component?
Absolutely. I support finding new ways to support folks who are experiencing mental health crises. I can tell you from personal experience working with someone in our homelessness community that pulled a knife in my day center at Chief Seattle Club, and I saw a social worker de-escalate the situation in less than a minute. So it was heartbreaking because I've seen this with my own eyes. It was incredibly heartbreaking for me when I saw son, uncle, nephew down there on Alaska Way with a knife who was many feet away from these officers, and then he was shot and killed. That was heartbreaking for me. And those are the kinds of things that should be taken out of the hands of our Seattle Police Department. I absolutely support community innovation around new ways to support mental health in our system. And I will also say that we have to get to the Washington State Legislature as well. We know that Washington State is vastly behind in supporting mental health in our system. I think that as we work so hard to support our homeless community, it can be absolutely heartbreaking when you see someone who needs that support and we have nowhere to send him. We have to fix that. And that's going to take courageous leadership. It's going to take decisive leadership, and it's going to take innovation. And I believe I'm the right leader for those for those kinds of issues going on in our community.
So you talked a little bit earlier about the necessity of affordable housing. 8% of Seattle's land that is zoned for housing is zoned for single family housing. Over the last 5 years, most of the new construction centered in the 12% that supports highly dense housing. Developers and builders focused on small footprint properties with minimal parking and luxury appointments. Housing affordability is a major problem for Seattle, as you've noted already. Do you support changing zoning rules for ADUs and more dense construction to alleviate the housing crisis? And what changes would you support?
Absolutely. You know, we have a lot of competing challenges before us. Like, we haven't really talked yet about climate crisis, but those are there are intersections there, and housing affordability emergency is upon us right now. And we need to be thoughtful and creative about creating more density in our city, creating opportunities for, creating more housing that really truly works for our community. I absolutely believe in transit-oriented development. I think that our backyard cottages are amazing. And then I think we need to think about how we build affordable housing that truly does not encourage gentrification, but encourages our Black and Indigenous and people of color communities to come back into Seattle. I have worked on the community preference policy. I think that is a really excellent way to get started. And I think that there is just tremendous opportunity around affirmative marketing for some of our affordable housing that's being built. We have to change our zoning laws if we're going to truly address our climate crisis and our housing affordability.
Seattle has a reputation for having high taxes compared to other Washington cities. A number of initiatives have added incremental taxes to fund transit, homeless programs, education, and the general fund. These taxes are small on paper, 0.1%, for example, but most of these taxes are regressive due to Washington state's tax structure. Will you pledge no new taxes for Seattle?
I take a people first approach on this, and I think that we absolutely need to understand the impact of a sales tax on our community. And it is not fair, it is not just, and we need to do better. Now, we have certain legal issues around an income tax, and we need to find new ways to generate revenue. So I would not say no, I will not incur any new taxes, but I think I want to incur the right kind of taxes, the taxes that are fair. I think a capital gains tax is really interesting and something that I would absolutely explore. But I believe that we in this city understand our responsibility to our homeless community, to community that is hurting and suffering. In a city like Seattle, we should not have, the amounts of poverty that we have in some of our communities. We should not have, health inequities that we have, and that's going to take some money. And we need to understand, we need to continue to understand that. And I look forward to working with community about what the kind of investments that we want to make.
Indigenous peoples are leading the efforts to bring about many meaningful changes globally, nationally, and locally. If elected, you would be the first Indigenous mayor of Seattle since the office's inception in 1869, something that is long overdue. Can you speak to the significance of what being elected mayor of Seattle would mean both to you personally and what it potentially signifies for Native nations and communities more broadly?
I started thinking about running for mayor because I care about the city and I care about our homeless community, and I know I have the right kind of solutions. Being an Indigenous mayor kind of just was part of who I am. And as I started thinking about it and understanding it more, it's become more important. I have two amazing, beautiful children, and I want them to understand and know that it's normal for a Native woman to be the mayor of a city, because I didn't have that growing up. When Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland were elected into Congress, I have goosebumps thinking about it right now. It just was so unbelievable to me. People who I know understand and know and understand where I come from. To have that kind of representation, it matters. Before I announced, I talked to leaders of the Coast Salish communities, because I'm in their land right now. I am not Coast Salish, I'm Pawnee. And then I also talked to some of my elders, and my one elder said to me, Colleen, you need to remember that in our language, leader means servant. And you need to remember that as you are trying out this new thing, that you are a servant to this community. And I take that seriously. I take that soberly, that if elected mayor, that I would be a servant to this community. I would lead from a place of humility and a place of understanding the issues that are in this community, and that I have the right kind of solutions. And there are different solutions. I think it's time for new ideas and new people to be in elected office, and it's exciting, and I take it seriously, and I hope I win. I hope I'm that first person.
Yeah, again, she's clearly very passionate about Seattle and has a lot of, really good ideas she's worked in homelessness, worked dealing with unhomed peoples, particularly Native peoples who make up a predominant sector of the unhomed population in Seattle, for being a small amount of the population that exists within the city. So I think she has some really interesting ideas for that. I'm curious to see more about her platform, especially as it relates to climate change.
Yeah, it was a great interview. It was great hearing her platform. She's one of my first impressions, and so people understand, I'm operating actually as engineer in these interviews. I'm literally just there in the capacity for technology. She is really charismatic, and it just came across even through the Zoom format, this virtual meeting format. She is really charismatic.
Yeah, no, she definitely is extremely vivacious. Like I said, passionate about city. She clearly loves Seattle and has a lot of wonderful things to say about it. And I think she could make some, really great contributions to trying to find some solutions for the unhomed problem. Crisis that we're facing is a better word.
Jennifer, the next mayoral candidate that we're interviewing is Lorena Garcia.
Lorena Gonzalez.
Gonzalez, yes, yes, thank you. Lorena Gonzalez, not the cook, not the celebrity chef Lorena Garcia, Lorena Gonzalez, yes.
I'm hungry, David. Did the potato scones, you're like, oh, I gotta think about food, and that's what came out?
Now that you say that, actually, my gears are turning on what I'm going to go eat. I haven't eaten much today because not feeling well, and I'm like on that other side of the curve now. And yeah. I am actually kind of feeling the David hungry at the moment. So we ran a little over, but we're almost to the finish line. We'll do a quick pause for the cause, and we'll go into the last story.
Okay.